Hi, hi everybody. Hi Bettina. Hi Olga. Uh, this is one of our free flow sessions. Olga and myself, we love to organize, and after our first ones, we thought, okay, how can we broaden our view? How can we change a little bit or bring some more interesting views in it? And thought, okay, let's invite people into our free flow who are not specifically coming from the coaching angle, because that's boring. We're always talking only about coaching. So yeah, so that's why today we have the pleasure, honor to have Bettina Schuster in the call, or in our free flow conversation, taking the whole being enough thing, which is one of the biggest topics in coaching, from the yoga angle. So we are really looking forward to share, to get your shares, but also to exchange on the topics. And so Bettina, maybe one question. Yoga is all about moving, asana, and it's all about sports. Why do we talk about being enough? Tell me.
Like, I'm really excited definitely to join you guys now with this free flow. So first of all, I'm really impressed, Marco, that you even know the word asana, because like a lot of people, they think yoga is simply just an exercise and don't even know the Sanskrit word. So well done on this one already. But I would definitely answer that this is how I was as well introduced to yoga, that for me, it was all about the exercise. And I think for a lot of people in the Western country, this is how they see yoga. And I think it's not wrong. It's right, because it's one part of yoga, but it's not equal yoga. So if you think of yoga, asana, so the physical practice is one part of it, but the whole ethnica, the living principle, is more or less the bigger chunk next to breathing exercises and meditation. So the workout or the exercise as such is definitely one part and an important part, but not the only one. So that's why I'm here.
So you just opened the door for that question. What are the other ones?
So yeah, actually, a lot of those principles are based on the Yoga Sutra, which was written thousands of years ago from Patanjali. And they are more or less, you call them the 8 limbs. So this is a path you should live, or like a guidance you should live as a yogi, or actually every person. And you have more or less the first 2 principles, the first 2 limbs, called yama and niyama, which are the ones I'm always saying, like really high level explaining. The yama is from the outside in, so how you interact with the world, the people, the things around you, the situations, and how it influences you, but as well to understand why you're reacting in a certain way to a certain situation. And then the second one is more or less the niyama, which is then more or less from the inside out. I'm saying always on a high level, because it's more or less observing you, understanding a little bit your feelings and your emotions, your reactions. And then for sure this influences, as you guys know as a coach, how you react with the outside world too. And then more or less just the third limb is then asana, so the physical practice. The yoga practice we mainly know in the Western countries. And then you more or less go into pranayama, which is like moving your life force. So we often see it equally as a breathing exercise. This is more or less the tool, but prana is your energy, your life force within you. And through breathing, you have actually the possibility to change your energy, your flow, and more or less your energy level. And then you go more or less, the next ones are quite specific, going more into the meditation. So you have then really like the focal meditation, the meditation which is opening wider. You try to withdraw your senses so that you actually don't see, don't hear, like try not to speak. And then you really go into the last point, into samadhi, where you say you really have now the bliss and you actually fully merge with everything around you. But since we're all humans, let's face it, I mean, if we all would be so well educated, we would all jump into the bliss and know everything right away. But since we're humans, like most of the time we spend with the first 2 yamas, where we try to understand why we react in a certain way. And Some love to actually jump right away into the physical practice, ignoring those parts. But I think it's really valid and interesting to jump into those and to understand you and your surrounding.
Wow, so many things I want to ask questions about now. It's like you use the big word samadhi, but I think we will not go down that road because otherwise we'll not talk about anything else than that. So, Olgi, check note, we have to talk about samadhi in one of our free flows. Maybe thank you, and maybe coming back to the basics. Now, what does yoga mean? Like, if I would just translate it to whatever, English, German.
Yeah. So for me, it's actually a nice quote. How I always think how yoga is. It's actually yoga is a journey from yourself, through yourself, to yourself. So it's always something I love because I think whatever part you see of yoga, and especially now with social media, people see a fancy yoga peak pose if you want to go purely to the physical practice. And the only thing they have in mind is like, I want to be able to get into this fancy peak pose and be able ideally to post an Instagram picture and share it with the rest of the world. But no one actually sees the journey to that pose. So even if you would see it just purely from a physical practice, it is a journey that you understand yourself, you understand your mental state, you understand your breathing, you understand as well, for sure, your physical body. And by understanding yourself, you can actually kick off the journey and ideally find into whatever state it is. If it's a peak pose, if it's that you really feel completely relieved in a meditation or after meditation, but it's really a journey more or less through yourself to yourself. That's often how I love to translate it.
So what you say is that yoga is not about stretching and getting long muscles.
Yes. It's definitely. I said, like, it's always one part of it, but it's not the equal one. So you're not a better or worse person if you have super flexible muscles and can come easily into whatever fancy pose. So even like in the physical practice, you need to have the strength, the muscular engagement to be safe in the pose and not be purely flexible and jump into something. So even there, flexibility is not bad. It's just a part of it, but it's not yoga as such. Yeah.
Well, maybe share from my side if you permit. But what I found out is having been extremely unflexible for a long time of my life, and having a yoga teacher as my wife. So I hear a lot about yoga, but even if you have a yoga teacher at home, that doesn't mean that you do yoga. What I found. We try that every now and then. It never really works. But when what I wanted to share is that at the end, the flexibility for me came back, and that was actually through the fact that I stopped doing sports like crazy, and that I started to release a lot of stuff which were deeply ingrained into myself. So it talking about emotions, talking about fears, talking about all that stuff. And that gave me back a huge amount of flexibility. Now, I'm not a yogi, don't worry. But it gave me back that flexibility. And that made me think that finally, that's what yoga does, but from a physical point of view. It tries you to the fact that you really do these poses, and it depends on what you do, vinyasa, whatever you want to do, or yananga, whatever. If you do this kind of yogas, you will release your muscles. So it's another, from my point of view, it's another angle, and that's where I want to come to. It's another angle to personal development at the end. Either you do it through yoga and then you grow up into meditation. So yoga means whatever, vinyasa, you just do your poses and your handstand and you're really great. And then you grow into the psychological or the spirituals part of it. That's one axis. So it's all about the different axes. And now that's where I try to do loop into coaching, because that's another axis from our side, that's another axis. So it's a cognitive axis more than a spiritual, at least at the first glimpse. Now, the topic of today, we said we were talking about being enough from a lens of yoga and coaching. So could you share a little bit on that, so that we can get our free flow going? Because I didn't hear Olga at all till now, and I'm talking. So I think I have to shut up at one moment in time.
No, so actually, for me, it was like, actually, I can fully understand your story, because this was as well how I was introduced to yoga. So I used to play football on a competitive level, and I just did yoga as like more or less to help me to lower my lower back pain. And that's why for me as well, it was mainly about stretching and the physical practice. And even at the beginning, I didn't really see it as proper sport exercise. I must always say, like, I thought like, oh yeah, it's just stretching and that's it. So more or less as well, when I went into my first yoga class, I was sweating, I was dying. I looked around and you saw everyone being super nice and gracious in their positions. And then it was me struggling with a downward facing dog, where my yoga teacher back then said, just relax in that position. I'm like, how can you even think of relaxing in that position? So that's me. I came as well from that side and found then my way into yoga. And just as you explained, this was as well my journey. So for me, it was mainly my physical practice. And as well, when I became a teacher 7 years ago, it was as well like mainly focusing still on the physical part of yoga. And then over the years, like, I became more and more interested in say, what is behind this physical practice. It has benefits, because you start to connect your breath to your movements. You start to relax in maybe challenging positions. So you link it to your mind. But I said, like, I really dived deep in the last year when I did then a specific teacher training with Jeanette Stone, which was around living those 8 limbs. So living those yoga ethics and bring it to your daily life, because as well, it's written thousands of years ago, and it's still interesting that it's still valid. And some things are more valid than it probably was thousands of years ago. But this whole teacher training was to understand how those principles are still valid for the now and then, and how you can apply it to your daily life. And as well, it's not a tick that you can say, oh, I did one yama or niyama, job done, I can move to the next one. It's something which is a living exercise. So you feel one day, okay, you can catch yourself how you do the same mistake or fall into the same pattern again. And then just realizing, okay, this is what drives me in that moment. So more or less for me, doing this whole exercise while I was pregnant during a global pandemic, during a lockdown with a toddler at home, I used a lot of time to understand what drives me in a certain situation. How can I be more strong and grounded, not only for myself, but as well for my family around me? And one principle, which then links them more to the enoughness, is more or less asteya, which is called, like, it's more or less the third yama, like how you interact with the rest of the world. So this is more or less, if you translate it, it means non-stealing, but as well not taking too much, like taking what is more or less yours, so you can equally then feel enough and grateful for what you actually have. And this was one principle which was for me quite eye-opening, because if you would take it literal, I'm for sure not stealing. I'm not walking around and go shoplifting, as you would probably read it. You never know, but I don't do it. But it was like something, if you read it, you think like, oh yeah, tick, I'm not stealing, it's all fine. But if you go a little bit deeper and understand, why do people steal? What is this lack? What is driving you? And you're not only stealing things and goods, but you might steal something from your own journey, from your own opportunity. And this was something where I spent a lot of time understanding myself and understanding the surrounding, and then seeing how I can actually fulfill my journey a bit more. Long talk, I know.
No, it's super interesting.
I like it. It's beautiful, actually. When we talk about non-stealing, or how do we steal time, or how do we steal things from ourselves?
Yeah, so it actually, you can see it in a lot of different ways. So if you seek outward to see what others are doing, and it's like, again, those principles were written thousands of years ago, but I think Patanjali didn't have social media in mind, but I think social media for me is a perfect example. You seek outside, you see what everyone is posting, what everyone is doing. You can look to the TV, magazines, just to your friends, and you seek outside and start more or less realizing or focusing on what they have and you don't have. So the whole list is piling up saying, let's take Eugie. She's right now in Portugal, has the beach in front of her. And I could focus my whole energy in saying, I'm not in Portugal. I don't have that beach. I don't have this and that. Instead, I'm focusing on myself and saying, what do I have? What is the list I actually have? I have a beautiful forest just around the corner to go for hikes during autumn time. And you can just see and realize what is around me, what is part of my journey. So you more or less steal the opportunity to focus more on yourself and the things you have by focusing too much outwards and seeing what I actually don't have. And if it comes a little bit as well, like just purely to the practice, by going crazy a day with focusing and doing all kinds of sport, you steal actually time for yourself the next day. You will have sore muscles. The next day you will be remembered. You might have done a little bit too much. So you even steal a little bit from your own next day, or going too late to bed. And then the next morning you wake up and you're like, damn it, I should have gone earlier to bed. You steal your energy the next morning. So there are a lot of things where you can say it's like, for sure, this outward focusing, but as well for yourself, like being mindful and as well careful if it comes to yourself.
Well, that's super interesting. No, like I don't have a question. Like, wanted to share something which comes up, because this is very interesting how in general we interact with the world, right? We always try to look to the outside to find there's something which potentially we don't have, and we start comparing ourselves to others, and from this comes this feeling that's like, I'm doing something not enough, or I'm not being enough. So I'm like, I don't know, not trying hard enough. I'm not educated enough. I'm not hardworking enough. Or like, I don't know, I don't have the same amount of money, or I don't have the same like position at work. So all of this, like with our attention to the outwards, and not so much on the inwards.
Yeah. And I think it's as well something to focus outward, and then this comparing, and I said, like stealing from your own journey. It's the one part in doing it. But what I found quite interesting during this exercise was more or less to write down, why do I do it? So the one thing is like doing the exercise and focusing on what the others have, but what is driving me in that moment? Is it because I really feel maybe potentially even bored in that moment, and you go on social media and you want to see what everyone else is doing? Do I feel that I have a lack or disappointed? So it's something as well to understand exactly what you said, like seeking outwards, but what is driving me in that moment? So I think it's something then again where gratitude as a bridge can really help to again list down what you actually have and for what you can be grateful that you are enough in a moment.
I don't know how for you, Marco. Sorry, can I jump in, because it's super interesting what comes up as well, that it is like a lot of social conditioning here, or at least like that's what is coming up for me, that like from our childhood we're being programmed like how we have to be nice in order to be accepted. Marco, we talked about it before, right? That only when we do something, achieve something, behave in a certain way, like have something in our behaviors, then we are nice. Nice kids, nice people, like accepted, like don't, I don't know, interrupt your parents, like do this, do that. And then when we grow up, like it still stays with us, so in order to be accepted, I need to have this car, or I need to have this job, or I need to travel a lot, or I need to post on Instagram, like something that others see my life in a way. Mark, what's coming up for you?
Comes up for me is my topic of for the moment. It's all about our world is torn to be. So we are striving to do and then to become. So we are striving to do a big business so that we can become rich or become famous, or we try to do good singing so that we become famous, and that's how the world is torn. That's how we call it. We call it no pain, no gain. It's a nice phrase. It's a very dangerous phrase, because at the end, and there are actually studies on that, which I have to find back actually. Find for myself to look that back. But there were studies on that when entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship are striving to become number one in whatever they do, how much negative energy they produce during that time.
Mm-hmm.
So this negative energy, even so, if let's talk about Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, even if these guys at the end become something or have created something and have the recognition, first of all, for themselves. Well, look at Steve Jobs. Huh? So everybody on his funeral got the book from Yogananda about how was it called? The Life of a Yogi, the first real book written by a yogi, and that's what he gave people. He never lived like that. He wrote an autobiography so that his children know who he was. That's what he did. So now in our society, we worship these guys. We think these are the most amazing guys ever. Elon Musk, the same, and whoever who we can find. So, but what is done during that time? What do we do during? How much negative energy we are creating? How much negative, negativity we are proliferating around ourselves, rather than starting to be and really to ask ourselves this question. And that's an ongoing question. It's a journey, we know that. But asking really, who are we? Who am I? Who am I? And then derive, that's my favorite phrase, but then derive our doing from this being. And that being will change and so on. But at least there is the pursuit, as the Americans call it. There's a nice movie about that. The pursuit for happiness. It is real, because it's not the pursuit for happiness outside. That was Smith doing, but it's the pursuit of happiness inside, and then do whatever is needed to find that happiness. And if that is for some creating SpaceX, then it's great. If it's about that. But if it is about how can I be seen as the most beautiful guy in the world, then I pollute the world till I maybe get there.
Mm-hmm. But I think this is actually a nice part, because often if it comes to this enoughness, and as well from the yoga philosophy, often people misunderstand it and think like, oh, then they don't have a drive. They don't want to achieve something. They don't want to do something. They're enough with what they have, and they just chill at the beach and hang around, and there's no need to actually move forward. But this is not really the case, maybe. But because it's often like you still can, as you said, like have this goal in mind, whatever it is for you. But it's not that you focus so much on the outward, how the others are achieving it, what the others are doing, that you compare yourself constantly to everyone around, because then your emotional state is more or less linked to their failure or their success. So if they fail, you might feel better because you feel, oh, I'm over them, I'm arrogant, I can achieve more. If they actually then more or less succeed, you might then feel depressed, angry, sad. So it's more like focusing on yourself. It's your journey. You can still have that goal. You can still want to achieve something, but you focus more on your journey and the way how you go there. So this is as well something, again, a lot of people might then take a wrong role model as an example and saying this might not fit their personality at all, but they just try to actually achieve the same goal. But then again, it goes back to don't steal from your own journey. Don't steal from your own opportunity, because you might have different strength to actually go that way. Mm-hmm. So this goes in back again a little bit of like, you can feel enough and you can still have the drive and can achieve and want to persuade goals.
Yeah, something that comes up as well is that's how people burn out as well, like constantly comparing, constantly focusing outwards instead of kind of honoring their own journey and seeing that maybe their journey is completely different from what everybody else is doing.
Completely. And I mean, if you take it to work life, if a colleague gets a promotion, it doesn't make you worse or better just by him or her getting the promotion. You should then rather focus on like, okay, how can I achieve it in that moment? What are maybe some characteristics I have to work on? What are maybe some things I need to learn more? But it's not focusing so much your energy being angry or sad or whatever that person got it and you not, but rather, again, putting your focus and your attention to yourself and saying, how can I actually then work on myself and to potentially get into the same position?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're back, Olga. We're back to success, huh? And what is success? Now you talked about role models, Bettina, and I agree. It's so much easier to find this role model who struggled all his life and then came up with something great, and I'm very happy for him that he did. But it's more difficult to find the role models which just were content in their being and then achieved whatever they wanted to achieve, because it's not fancy. It's not a nice story to talk about. It doesn't really bring a lot of readership in a journal as much as viewers on TV. So it's not as easy to do. So the only stories we know more or less is like we got a movie from Gandhi and we hear about the Dalai Lama. But then again, these are these people we are spotting as so highly spiritual at the end that it is detached, and people are detaching themselves from them. Either they are worshipping them too and saying, I can never go there, but they're not really feeling inspired by them. So I think one of the roles, actually the role, what I see and I want to take on is it's actually to be inspiring, as being in a normal life situation, having to somehow struggle with everything, but still at least walking the path of being, rather than maybe write a book about it only and talk about it, but really walking it and trying to derive my doing from that. Now, yeah, we need millions of people who want to inspire us so that that things will finally swap to the other side.
Yeah. I mean, the nice part, and it's, again, like when I looked into all those limbs and like as well how I'm dealing with one of them or the other one, something I found quite interesting as well, like the part of stealing as well, that you steal someone's journey. And then I thought, like, you can catch yourself as a mom in this, potentially you guys as a coach as well, me as a line manager at work as well, that if someone comes with a problem to you, often the tendency is like, oh, I jump on it, I give you the solution, but then you're actually stealing from their own journey to find the solution. So as a mom, often, like, if you have a little one and they more or less struggle with whatever they do, and then you want to go and ideally you want to take it and just solve it for them, but then you think like, wait a minute, I'm stealing from their own learning, from their own journey. They need to potentially fail, find their own way, but it's not me giving them always the solution. And then to the point with role model, like for me being at work, having a team, I'm as well trying to be a role model, being inspiring, but not giving constantly the solution. So I'm always telling as well the girls in my team, come to me ideally with your idea and your solution, and then we can discuss it. But I don't want to be the one giving you this, like the solution, potentially because I have more experience. So that's why I think as well, if it comes to role models, I mean, if then people take a book and live by it afterwards, it's great, they get inspired by it, but it doesn't mean equally that it all works for you. So it's just reading, understanding, and seeing who you are and what you can actually do with the information you got.
That's why actually in coaching we never give advice.
Yeah, I learned it for you. But yeah, so that's why I find it quite interesting, because it's really like more or less poking, and that's why I think a lot of those principles are so nicely linked to coaching from yoga, because it's really, I don't want to give you the solution. I'm just explaining you a little bit, this is what's happening around you. And now put yourself in that position and see how you react and why you react in a certain way.
And from that extent, it's quite close to yoga and coaching are quite close, because when we talk about in coaching, we talk about giving space to our coachee to find his own solution. And if I understand right, that's what you do with yoga, because you're giving the space to the person to do his own pose and to be able to do it as the way he is enough to do it and as he can do it. And there are so amazing stories of people who just turned their world around through doing yoga, because they at the beginning they always did what they could. They were always enough for what they could do at that moment, and that made them progress to where they wanted to go.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of analogy here. Even so, we are more going through the cognitive process. Definitely.
And I mean, some quotes I always love in that context, if it comes to this whole journey, is it said, actually, was it a yoga conference? I can't even recall who said it back then, but it was a teacher who said, don't wish your life away. And something, if it comes to stealing for me as well, if it comes to this whole journey, you can see it. And I mean, Marco, you mentioned it earlier briefly, that people, like, you go to college and you're looking forward to the job, or you start your own business and you only look forward to making tons of millions of money. So you're focusing so much on, like, what will happen in the future. So you always wish yourself almost into that moment already without appreciating the journey to it. And I mean, it starts our whole life. If I now see my 4-year-old son, he's walking around saying, I can't wait to go to school. And I'm like, don't wish your life, enjoy kindergarten. Don't wish it away. Like, every step is valid, but we all have it throughout our whole life. If it's Monday, you wish it's Friday, so the weekend starts. If you're back at work, you wish actually your vacation starts, so time flies that hopefully you can go on holiday again. I mean, now with the global pandemic, we all wish it's soon away, that we can go back to normal. So we all wish actually more or less our life away, but it's still part of our journey and each step is valid. But I always love that quote, because I catch myself as well, that I'm thinking, oh, I wish it's the end of the day, my boys are in bed and I can have a little bit of time for myself. But more or less, you wish a little bit your life away. So I always keep that in mind and have a nice reminder to not steal time for myself.
So how do you actually then start focusing more on yourself and your own journey versus this focus towards the outside? How do you see it from the lens of yoga?
I mean, something which helps me is as well to find my routine, to actually, again, with whatever happens right now outside, to see, okay, what is the part I can feel, again, a bit more in control, which is my own practice, my own asana practice, what feels good for me, feels good for my body. So this is definitely helping me to again, feel a bit more grounded through my yoga practice. And as well, what I really tried, and I mean, reducing a little bit social media. It's a tiny step, but it's as well, I actually got this, it's called the 6-minute diary, like Tagebuch, more or less in German, where you start each day with writing down what you're grateful for, what you want to achieve the day, giving yourself tiny little goals. And then more or less by the end of the day, when you go to bed, you more or less just write down, like, again, there are 3 specific questions, like, to your day, what made you really happy, what is something you want to improve tomorrow. But like, really for me, like, starting my day, not jumping right away on my phone, looking on social media, what's happening, or the news, but rather focusing again on myself and say, okay, so what are we doing today? Like, what is my day today? Not ignoring what's happening outside, but as well setting my focus to first focus on myself and my day, and then going more outwards as soon as I feel a bit more grounded. I try.
No, you walk the journey, and that's what is so beautiful about it, is that we another misconception of our society is that we are always striving for perfection, and then say, yeah, well, if I am not doing, and then we're talking about not being enough, but if I'm not doing 30 minutes of meditation in the morning, and then 10 minutes of writing, and then I take 12 minutes a tea, and I talk to my wife, and then whatever routine you have, and you're not doing it, like the society asks you to show you how consistent and how good you are at that, and so on and so on. But that's not what it is about. What it is about is what feels right, feels right for us at that moment. And you talked a lot about, so when you spoke about talked a lot about the present moments, a lot about what Eckhart Tolle always says. It's about being in the present moment rather than wishing your life away. I never saw that link like that, but I like it very much because, I will travel again one day, but that's not my concern now. My concern now is to be home and to do what I do now, because the facts are the facts, and I will not change them, and I'm not ready to change them. So, like, I have friends who are traveling like crazy. I have friends who actually now, during this pandemic, they are seeing the world with business class. It's amazing. Nobody booking only business class to wherever they want, because they can, and they decided to do so, and they are free to do so. Fine, that's not my decision, and it's not so. It's about being enough for yourself at that present moment.
And I mean, exactly what you said, Marco, like as well, when this whole global pandemic kicked off, I focused as well so much to the outside, how others react, what others are doing. And then I might have got angry, upset. And I'm like, I can't change what they're doing. I can't, it's their decision how they deal with it. It's again me, like, how do I deal with this whole situation? And then again, ideally to the whole role model thing, being a mom as well, being a role model to my kids, how I do deal with this whole situation. But it's really being present in the here and now and saying some factors we can't change. It's outside of our circle of control. And let's face rather on the things which are inside that make me again feel enough and feel more grounded. So I think a good side of this was potentially that people spend a little bit more time with themselves and reflecting on certain situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I organized actually with an initiative I'm working on with some friends about we made interviews with people how the pandemic or the first lockdown positively impacted their life, and it's beautiful. Actually, what came up several times is, I finally came to do yoga, which is quite amazing, because a lot of people with whom I talked, it was really about finding themselves, taking time, going into nature, connecting, and now that doesn't take away the awfulness of what happens for a lot of people, but it is there. We have that opportunity. Now we can say, oh, we are lucky bastards because we live in the West and everything's fine. And we live, like myself, I live in a small village, so I can go outside, whatever. So that for sure. But then again, isn't that also responsibility of doing it? Because that's how we can create, how we can influence the world in some extent, by just being in ourselves and creating this field of peace, which I can totally understand when you have a harder time to do that in Paris or Nice or wherever, where you have the right to go out a half an hour, or where you just lost your apartment. So we have that. I think we have that responsibility of doing it for everybody. Yeah.
Something else that comes up for me, and which is very interesting, what you, Marco, mentioned, that a lot of people started actually during the lockdown practicing yoga finally. And something that comes up for me is that yoga actually is this one practice where you become very, very present in the moment, because you start focusing on your body in that moment. Like when you are on your mat, it's not about the outside, it's just you're focusing how you like come into like a certain asana, like how you align your body, and all of a sudden your focus shifts from the outside towards inside on your body. And becomes even more important as well, like in terms of kind of managing and understanding our emotions, because, you know, like Marco, we also talked about it, right? That like emotions, they live in our body, they're more or less like our physical sensations. And that's the importance of yoga from the physical perspective, you know. So whatever, you know, you are feeling, it manifests somehow itself in your physical body. So through practicing yoga, that also can help you to release, to work through your emotions, whatever that is, like if that's fear, if that's anger, if that's like frustration, whatever comes up. And that's kind of the beauty of like through the practice of yoga to refocusing on yourself and like creating this understanding and focus on the moment rather than being, you know, everywhere and wishing your life away in the future.
Yeah, I mean, and this goes actually back to how we kicked off the whole conversation, because even though a lot of people might now find yoga just from purely the physical practice, but as you explained it, Eugi, and this is completely right, I mean, it's part like you have the subtle body, which is our muscle, bones, joints, organs, everything. But you have this energetic body around you, like certain positions make you feel grounded, certain positions make you feel more energetic. In some, like in our hips, we store deep emotions. So if you go into a lot of hip openers, it might be that you cry not only because of the pain, but emotions coming up you held there. So potentially people might not be aware of it, which is perfectly fine, but simply by finding into this practice, they could actually release certain emotions they held. And they could actually feel more, they feel calmer, they feel more aligned by purely doing this practice without knowing how the energetic body is actually aligning itself to in that practice. So I think this is a really, again, nice way of people, again, finding through yoga potentially the next steps, going more into the cognitive and meditation, and then potentially into coaching and understanding a bit more themselves. But I think it's really nice because the physical practice is a nice door opener to actually understand a little bit the energy flow, which is linked to it too. And I mean, Eugi used to me in yoga classes crying because the hip openers let all the emotions coming out. So I think, again, this is perfectly fine and just a nice experience of like understanding yourself.
What comes up for me when you say that is actually I practiced, unfortunately not anymore, but I practiced a lot of qigong at a long time ago, and now that's not so much about aligning as it is about in yoga. There's so much about energy, and when you feel the energy moving in yourself, and that in essence is any practice which makes you get aware of your body actually is necessary to do. And Olga, you know, I'm this fasting freak, so I long to do prolonged fasting. And the main reason for that is really because I get a connection with myself, with my body. I don't have it. And actually, I'm looking forward to December when I start my longer fast. Even so, I know it's always a hassle, it's always difficult to do. It's a little bit the same. It's like how you do anything is how you do everything. And it's like how you get angry, how you act. And it's the same on the yoga mat, most likely. When you get angry that you cannot do that pose now, but I could, and I trained so much for it. And it's like it actually we recreate the same in a small ball, where whatever ball we do, and as soon as we are focusing inside, we recreate the same reactions we recreate when we go outside. And that's where our power lies, is to get aware of that and then change it there and change it outside. That comes back to before doing, comes back to the same.
Exactly.
So Olga, one last question.
So let's direct it to
Mark.
Let's direct it to Bettina, since she's our special guest today. So if anything, maybe one last message that you would want to leave to our viewers, like to the people who are gonna watch this conversation from the yoga perspective, like any Any last words before we close the conversation?
I think I would definitely leave it with the quote I mentioned before of saying, don't wish your life away. So each step, it might be a step you feel lifted and feel high and great, or it might be a step you feel a little bit low and down. Each step is valid and important on your journey. So that's why I think you should always feel enough in a way of focusing on yourself and really enjoy the journey. Either way, it's your journey and no one can steal it from you.
Beautiful. On this beautiful quote and remark, I end our broadcast, and I thank you so much. It was again a very enriching free flow, and looking forward to the next one.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.